Now, this petition, we're going to take quite a bit of time to deal with it because it's from a man called Daniel Ofori. Yeah? Now, let me explain to you about Daniel Ofori so that you can get it well. In 2011, Daniel Ofori sued EcoBank to enforce the terms of a share trade transaction between the parties. This would have compelled EcoBank to provide funds for Daniel Ofori to acquire shares in another bank. The High Court ruled in EcoBank's favor. Okay. Daniel Ofori is a very active guy at the Ghana Stock Exchange. He's one of the reasons why the stock exchange has been active. He's been there for a while. Daniel Ofori entered into a transaction with EcoBank. Sorry, we have to mention EcoBank's name, but the other bank we will not mention. And Daniel Ofori wanted a loan from EcoBank to acquire shares in another bank whose they had done, what did the bankers call it? A call-up offer. How did they call it? After the IPO and they need money and they do a call-up, that thing. So they had done a call-up offer, and so Daniel Ofori, as a shareholder, wanted to maintain his shares and acquire a few more shares. So he wrote to EcoBank for a loan, and then I think they were doing the transaction when, for some reason, the Bank of Ghana decided that that bank cannot do that XYZ, something like that. So in 2011, EcoBank then refused to advance Daniel Ofori the money. So Daniel Ofori sues in the High Court, saying that EcoBank has to give him the money. Okay. Now, the High Court rules against Daniel Ofori that you cannot have that. You can't have that. The case is entitled, I believe, Daniel Ofori versus EcoBank or EcoBank versus Daniel Ofori. There's Daniel Ofori versus EcoBank, there's EcoBank, Daniel Ofori, several of them around. Okay, so this is the said Daniel Ofori. So he sued, and the High Court said, no, you can't have the money. Then he goes to Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal confirms the decision. This is in 2013. The Court of Appeal confirms the decision of the High Court and held that EcoBank was not bound to pay the sum owed to Daniel Ofori. Entered the Supreme Court in 2018. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of Daniel Ofori and held that Daniel Ofori was entitled to a sum of 13.2 million Ghana cedis and 30% interest on the said sum from the date accrued from June 2008. Now, the first transaction was in 2008. The conversation about buying shares of another bank was in 2008. That was the date, 2008 to the date of the judgment in July 2018. It's very interesting. Okay, so at this stage, Daniel Ofori has won the Supreme Court's decision. All right. At this time, Justice Tokonu is not a member of the Supreme Court. Chief Justice Gertrude Tokonu is not a member of the Supreme Court at the time the Supreme Court made this decision. All right. Now, EcoBank discovered instances of alleged fraud in the share transfer, and hence the case should be reopened. The court rejected the application and refused a review of the decision. This is very interesting. So later on, Justice Tokonu becomes a member of the bench of the Supreme Court. Now, EcoBank, in now looking at the matter, as Supreme Court says that they have lost, they need to pay Daniel Ofori so much money. They're looking at it, and their lawyers discovered that, but there's some fraud in the application, in the first High Court application. Look at the documents that he presented. Okay, so they allege fraud. Now, once you allege fraud in any matter, you can always go back to the court and say, that, oh, my laws, wait. I have now observed some fraud, and they should look at it. So EcoBank applied for the Supreme Court to reopen the matter, and they failed in that application. The Supreme Court did not reopen the matter. Then the EcoBank appealed against the Supreme Court's decision not to reopen the matter. I believe it's at this stage that Gertrude Tokonu is now part of the court, the Supreme Court. And in the review application, I think Gertrude Tokonu participates in the review application. EcoBank still lose the review application, but now it's not unanimous anymore. Justice Tokonu is able to convince other Supreme Court judges, including Justice Adom-Otchere, to rule on her side, because in her argument, something called compound interest, based upon which the Supreme Court took their decision, is a nullity, because compound interest, she said, had been nullified by Parliament. There's nothing like compound interest. How can then the court calculate compound interest? These are the arguments in the document. So some of them sway on that side, but the majority are still with Daniel Ofori. Okay. EcoBank thereafter go to the High Court, seeking to stop the execution of the ruling of the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court they will not hear them on reopening the case, and they lost the review on that. by a slimmer verdict than the unanimous 5-0 that they lost by in 2018, which was to say that they owe Daniel Ofori, they should go and pay. They come back and say, yes, we may owe him, but there's fraud. Supreme Court says, I will not listen to the fraud. They appeal against that, and then some Supreme Court judges, including Justice Tokonu, think that, look, you should listen to this because compound interest that you are talking about doesn't even exist. Anyway, so EcoBank now go to the High Court and ask the High Court judge that we have observed this fraud. Can you stop the execution of the Supreme Court ruling? And any court, even a lower court, can stop a decision of implementation of a decision of a higher court, so long as there's fraud. It's in the rules. So that is where we are. So EcoBank has now won the High Court's position that the thing should, the implementation, the execution should hold, stay of execution. That execution should be stayed pending the final determination of their fraud case against the said Daniel Ofori. Chachuchi Kata is one of the important lawyers of Daniel Ofori. Now, Daniel Ofori is a petitioner against the Lord Chief Justice. Let's look at it. Hello, Mr. Chachuchi Kata. How are you? We are talking about you on TV tonight. Not in bad terms, but in very neutral terms. So, Mr. Chikata is one of the most important lawyers of Daniel Ofori. And I told you to get me the video of Chikata and Tokonu. Please look out for it. Let's use it. All right. So, okay, Mr. Chikata, thank you very much. Good. Now, so Daniel Ofori writes a petition to oust Justice Tokonu as Chief Justice. We are saying and giving you the history because Daniel Ofori feels that, and he's told people that it is because Justice Tokonu came to the Supreme Court that his matter started becoming logoligi, lagalaga, logoligi, lagalaga. Daniel Ofori feels that it is Justice Tokonu, or perhaps Daniel Ofori is being told by his lawyers that it is Justice Tokonu who is in fact, in the petition, he directly points to Justice Tokonu sitting on the EcoBank case. Listen, let's start. All right.